Welcome to Blended Scotch Reviews by Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 35, maybe, and Scotch Family Feud number 2, coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas on November 19th, 2025, where it is currently 77 degrees. We've departed from our regular blended Scotch reviews and tournament to focus on one family of Scotch, the famous Grouse. We've studied and tested the famous Grouse, the baseline product. We've looked at the Bourbon cask. We have looked at Ruby cask. And Smoky Black. And so far in this contest, Ruby cask lost to the famous Grouse in the first round. Bourbon cask lost to Smoky Black in the second round. Then we did a loser's bracket with Bourbon cask versus Ruby cask, and Bourbon cask won. So Ruby is out, but Bourbon cask did not face off against the famous Grouse. So tonight, this is our head-to-head competition. So this is really a challenge match. Bourbon cask is challenging the second place winner in the initial tournament. Famous Grouse lost out to Smoky Black, so Famous Grouse is number 2 so far, but the challenger here says, wait a minute, I lost to the number 1 just like you did, so we deserve a match. And so this is the challenger match in this Famous Grouse family. My method: I evaluate each of these whiskeys in the same criteria as all my other reviews. I look at the history, the bottles, the label, the marketing, the appearance of the whiskey, composition, nose, taste, mouthfeel, burn, finish. How well do they serve as mixers or neat? Price, value, and availability. But the deciding factor really is drinkability. Which one do I like the best? The contest is conducted in blacked out glasses, blind. So that way I don't know which is which, and I can't tell them apart other than nosing and tasting. And for part of the fun, I do try to guess which whiskey is in which glass at the end, and I'm only hitting about 50% there. The glasses are numbered on the bottom. You, the viewer, can see that number when I'm sipping these whiskeys. Famous Grouse is number 1, Bourbon cask is number 2. All right, today's match. Let's start with history. In 1905, Matthew Gloag from Perthshire released the newly named Famous Grouse with the label on the day of opening for hunting season. So in other words, before that it was the Grouse, and before that it was Gloag's whiskey, and so now this is the Famous Grouse. And they marketed it to hunters. I mean, this bird is like the pheasant in our country. In England, Scotland, the grouse is the game bird, right? The big game bird. And so they released it on the opening day of hunting season because they got so many visitors coming into the Scottish Highlands that they marketed it towards the hunters. And that was a wise decision. Now, the cask finish series, like Bourbon cask here or Ruby cask, they weren't released until 2018, over 100 years later, right? 113 years later or something like that. And so when I did the review for the Bourbon cask, I could not find any more of this whiskey in Fort Worth. Since that time, I have found some more at the local goody-goody liquor store here in Fort Worth. But it's been removed from the website of Famous Grouse, so I kind of think it's a ghost whiskey. I think they're discontinuing that. So for history then, Famous Grouse, clearly the main label clearly has the edge for history. Bottle, label, and marketing. Now, the Bourbon cask does come in a box, and that's how I've seen it in the stores. whereas the Famous Grouse I've not seen in a box here in Fort Worth. But when you look at these, the box and the label on the bottle are similar in that, you know, brown. Okay, whiskey's known as a brown liquid. So you've got some gold highlights with the brown, a little bit of red there on the cap. And so there's a color scheme going with the Famous Grouse family. Here you have the black and some gold trim, and then the red cap as well. There's red involved on the trim as well, which matches the red Grouse. And so let's look at the bottles here. The bottles are identical, but the labels, with Famous Grouse, you get the grouse, red grouse is standing there. In the bourbon cask, you have a one-winged bird. We don't know what happened to the other wing. Yeah, you'd think you'd be able to see two wings, but I don't know. Maybe a hunter shot the wing off. Who knows? So as far as attractiveness of the labels, I'm going to give the edge to Famous Grouse. And clearly for marketing as well. A couple of years ago here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area on a local radio station, WBAP 820 AM, they ran for over a year, maybe 2 years, an advertisement for Famous Grouse whiskey. I've never seen an advertisement really for the Cask Finished series. I've only seen advertisements for the main bottling here. I think I have seen an internet video for Smoky Black, but nothing for bourbon cask. So for bottle label and marketing, you can't beat the Famous Grouse. There you go. Appearance. When you look at these, now there's not much of the Famous Grouse left, obviously. It's almost gone, but it is a little bit lighter color than the bourbon cask. So that bourbon cask, I think, has aged a little bit longer in used bourbon barrels, and it gets a little bit of that color there from there. But Scotch is allowed to add coloring, so who knows. But I'm going to give color and appearance to bourbon cask. Bourbon cask for the win. Composition. Again, the bourbon cask does get a little bit of extra treatment by being aged in ex-bourbon barrels. I think the technical term there is first fill bourbon cask. And so what that means is the barrels are new charred oak. They are filled with American whiskey to make corn whiskey, to make bourbon. Okay, and then after the bourbon is taken out of those casks, the casks are disassembled, sent to Scotland, reassembled, and no other liquid has gone in there until Famous Grouse goes in there. So that's why it's called first fill bourbon casks. So that little bit of extra aging in the bourbon cask imparts a lot of flavor and I think color. So for composition, I think the bourbon cask gets the win. Otherwise, I think they're the identical whiskeys. But the bourbon cask gets extra treatment there. So the win for composition and appearance goes to bourbon cask. Price, value, and availability. Famous Grouse can be had for $20.59 here in Fort Worth. Bourbon cask $25.99, so an extra $5. In Fort Worth, Goody Goody is the only store I've seen that carries the bourbon cask. And so I think that the price for bourbon cask is good. That extra $5 is worth it. It's a good value. It does give extra flavor, I'm sure. But tonight will be the test, right? But its availability is poor, and it may be a ghost whiskey. So I'm going to say for price, value, and availability, Famous Grouse for the win. All right, let's get to the whiskeys themselves. We're going to nose from left to right. I do get a sweet whiskey smell, a little bit of maltiness. Maybe some hints of fruit. Pears come to mind. Maybe apples and pears. So sweet, malty, light fruits. Very, that's a pleasant nose. Let's go to the one on the right. See if there's any difference at all. One on the right may be a little bit stronger, but I'm getting essentially the same smell. Now my nose is lousy. Me and smelling whiskeys doesn't work too well. I'm getting about the same smell, a little bit more intense. I'm not sure I'm getting any basic difference. But I'm going to give the one on the right the nose. It's a little bit stronger. So whichever one this is on the right wins the nose. Now, when I taste the whiskeys, I go with the one that had the lesser nose, if that's discernible. So I'll start on the left. And that is just a very pleasant drink. I really do like the famous Grouse line. This is about my third bottle of the basic version. The Smoky Black, I'm on bottle number 2, I think. But the Ruby Cask and Bourbon Cask, the only bottles I've ever had were those two. Okay, this one on the left. I mean, it's mildly sweet, malty, true to the nose. I'm getting little hints of pears and apples. So that is just this is the most widely consumed whiskey in Scotland, the famous Grouse. All right, that's really quite good. Now we're going to go to the one on the right. The nose was slightly more powerful than the one on the left, but flavor-wise, I am not sure. It may have just a touch more going on. Maybe. They are so similar. And this is why you do a blind study. Is one of these worth $5 more than the other one? At this point, I'm not sure. They are tasting so similar. Wow. I don't know there's any way I can decide between these two. The nose on the right is just slightly better, maybe. The flavor might be a little bit more intense. Can I say one of these is bourbon cask? I can't tell. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. are basically identical. This is the one on the right. I think the one on the right has just a little bit more going on. But I really can't decide between the two, which is which. But if I had to give an edge, I think I'll give it to the one on the right. But it is so close. I don't know. All right, I'm going to say the one on the right is the winner, but it's a hair's difference. I mean, there's just not much difference. As far as which whiskey is which, I don't have a clue. These are so close to being identical. All right, so the one on the right, I declare the winner. Which one is it? That is number 2, the Bourbon Cask. There you go. Glass number 1 is the famous Grouse. So we have a winner, but boy, was that squeaky. Squeaky. That's just that's so close. It's probably not even, I mean, I don't know. Now, is this one $5 more per bottle better? No, I don't think so. The difference here is so close. I don't think it's $5 better. So what does that do to my final result? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, it is maybe possibly a little bit better of a drink, but not that much better. So we'll stick with the winner though, and we'll say that Bourbon Cask wins. Which is which though? That's a tie. I could not tell. So, all right. What does this mean? Well, I'm not going to put Bourbon Cask against Smoky Black again. I think we've established that Smoky Black as a peated whiskey is the dominant one, and I tend to favor peated whiskeys. So, this will now be, Bourbon Cask will be number 2, and Famous Grouse will be number 3, but Smoky Black is the winner of this family feud right there. So you got 1 and you got 2. Now, there's one more grouse that I have that might be worth examining. So we're gonna review the Naked Grouse. Okay, it's changed the name. It's Naked Malt now, but it's still in the Grouse family. I'm going to review this. This is a blended malt, not a blended Scotch whiskey. This is a blended malt Scotch whiskey. And so I'm going to review this one, study this one, and then we will do a competition of this one versus Bourbon Cask and then Smoky Black. And we'll see. This one is in the $30 to $35 range. So we'll see if it's worth the extra. All right. Sometimes we give the winner a cocktail, but not this time. It's getting late in the evening. I'm not going to try to do a cocktail tonight. So for blended Scotch reviews, this is Stab the Dragon out here.